Why don't these proofs for God videos ever mean anything rational? In fact, they're just primers for what the religious are doing wrong. They'll never understand it, of course, because they just don't want to, but still, they're out in the weeds somewhere searching for comfort, not truth. So here we go again, because I guess this never gets old, right? Today, we're going to go take a look at an article that is, in turn, looking at a debate between Michael Egnor, part of the Discovery Institute, and Matt Dillahunty. Don't worry, even though I'll link to the debate in the comments, if you happen to want to go and watch it, it isn't remotely necessary. This just demonstrates where the religious go entirely wrong, as if that's any kind of surprise, and why, sadly, they're never going to get anywhere coherent when speaking to the non-religious. So let's get to it. So we'll start off where they're talking about part of the video where Egnor says there are, broadly speaking, two different kinds of theology. There's natural theology and there's revealed theology. Revealed theology is the use of scripture, personal experiences, or relationships to God. Now, we'll take the second one first because it's the easiest to dismiss. Nothing in so-called revealed theology means anything at all. It's all just a book says a thing. I'm interpreting my experiences in terms of my beliefs, and I really want to have an imaginary friend. We'll have the same problems with all of these, namely because none of them are objectively demonstrable, and that's what we need to be looking for. They're all based on subjective interpretations of ideas that cannot be validated in reality. Your wishes and your dreams and your emotional state are all entirely irrelevant to everybody but you. They don't prove anything to anybody but you, and you're kind of questionable there. Facts are what is true for everybody, regardless of your fifis. Therefore, let's move on to the first, where he says, natural theology is the use of evidence from nature that points to God's existence. Great, because that's actually what we want. Things that are demonstrable from reality that objectively point to the conclusion without your interpretations being involved. Give us some of that. But instead, we get this. Yes, he's going to go with Aquinas' 5 ways, which I suppose isn't remotely a surprise because Egnor is a Catholic. Catholics just have a hard-on for Aquinas, as we've seen in the past. That doesn't actually mean anything, though. Again, this is all interpretation, not evidence. I don't know that we've really addressed the 5 ways in the same series of videos, at least not in a while, so this is a perfect opportunity to go ahead and do it. It says, his first way is the observation that change exists in nature. Some of these causal chains are called instrumental change. Now, that's an observation, and thus we can go ahead and work with that. But what always comes next in these religious diatribes is an interpretation friendly to the religious side. X exists, therefore God. But that's all interpretation and faith, not demonstrable fact. You haven't shown that the existence of X gets you to a demonstrable case for God. In this case, instrumental change is a chain where each cause needs to continue to exist to cause the next cause. Fine, but you haven't demonstrated that any part of the chain is actually God. That's an assertion, not a demonstration. It's what you want to be true, and I'm only interested in what you can prove to be true. It finishes up with, when you have a chain of possibilities, there has to be something that causes the whole thing to start happening. And that is what all men call God. I don't care what you call it. I care if you can show that it is real. You can call it Mickey Mouse for all I care. But that doesn't mean it's Mickey Mouse. You have to be able to do better than that, and they never, ever can. So, back to Egnor, where he says, so that's Aquinas' first way. It basically is the argument that for something to happen in nature, there's got to be something at the beginning of it that is outside of nature, that has the ability to transcend nature and get things moving. This is really the problem, though, with relying on a bunch of old farts who wouldn't recognize modern science or cosmology if it bit them. The best they have is very simplistic knowledge that is exactly why the religious rely on them, because they want simplistic. They want something that they don't have to think about very hard because, thinking is hard. It's much easier to just embrace something on blind faith and pretend that it's just got to be true. That's why we have to continually go back and ask, how do you know that? Hell, how did Aquinas know that? Aquinas lived 1,000 years ago. Are we supposed to think that we haven't figured out anything since then? I don't think that's remotely justifiable, do you? Therefore, his first way fails because they haven't demonstrated a verifiable causal link between this thing and any real existing God. And that's the thing. You gotta prove God first. You can't just say, well, God done it. How do you know that? And better yet, how did you prove it? Where did you get the idea for God other than yanking it out of your ass? And that's the question that we always have. And they don't have an answer to that, do they? That's going to be a problem moving forward because what we call God is as close as they can get. I don't care what you call it. I care what you can demonstrate. So let's just continue. The second way has to do with causation, as opposed to change itself. Cool, but causation must be demonstrable, as I keep saying. You can't just say, invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies did it. You have to be able to back that up. Go ahead. Because at the end of their explanation it says, therefore it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause to which everyone gives the name of God. Really? I don't. Just because it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside to believe in an imaginary man in the sky, that doesn't actually mean anything. That's interpretation based entirely on pre-existing belief. Other religions will beg to differ. Even if we're going to stick with religion for a second here, how do you determine which one is actually true if Christianity's calling it God, Islam's calling it Allah, Hinduism is calling it Brahma, etc., etc., etc. Which one is right, and how do you know? And of course, better yet, how do you prove it? Then we can tack on 1,000 other religious claims, and you can show how you weed out the ones that are false, which you'd have to demonstrate they were false, to get to the one that's true, which you'd have to prove was true because there's no proof any of them are actually true. Tacking, therefore, God on the end, that doesn't mean anything, any more than saying, therefore, Harry Potter does. Just because you want it to be true, The third way is the argument that in order for anything to exist contingently, that is, that might not exist but it does exist, there must be one thing that necessarily exists. Great! Prove it! And their support, as you can see, is a video by Father White, and we've taken him on before, and he can't go 2 steps without relying on blind faith and wishful thinking. That doesn't get you anywhere, though. Who says that there is anything that is necessary at all, and how do you objectively justify it? Without saying, therefore God at the end. I mean, there is no reason at all to think that anything has to be here. That it is, that's not proof that it must have been. That goes for absolutely everything. The universe didn't have to be here, and it didn't have to be here in its current form. Conditions were right for it to come about as it is, and here it is. Of course, that's not emotionally comforting to some people, as I'm sure White would say, although not in so many words, so, God! But that doesn't really get you anywhere, does it? Why God? Why not Allah? Why not the flying spaghetti monster? We're not here to validate your feelings. We're here looking for actual, verifiable, demonstrable truth, and the religious don't seem to have any. I will sometimes tell theists that I want to understand the reality that would exist even if humans had never come to be. That means I don't care about your feelings. I don't care what you want. I don't care what makes you feel good inside. I want to know the actual state of reality beyond your say-so. And they can't handle that. It's really kind of sad. The fourth way is that we recognize degrees of perfection in reality. Yeah, about that. Because guess what? There is no perfection. Perfection is an unrealistic goal that doesn't exist in the real world. Again, we get the religious working with ideals, not facts. They want things that aren't objectively true in the real world. There is no perfection. Therefore, there is no ultimate perfection, any more than there's an ultimate shade of blue. And of course we get to, and that degree of perfection is God, which is entirely indefensible for reasons we've already gone into. But it makes me happy. Yeah, I don't care. We're not talking about your fifis. We're trying to talk about the facts, and I'm not sure why you people have such a problem with that. What is true, even if you're not here? That's something they have a really hard time dealing with. They can't get out of their own heads and into the real world. And I know that I've said this before, but the religious can't figure out that it's not all about them. It's not about them being happy, being emotionally comforted, being content that everything's going to work out for the best in some ultimate sense. They are irrelevant to reality. They're a part of it, certainly, but it ain't all about them, and they can't handle that. It's all about being self-centered, which humans often are, but you can also pull yourself out of the mix if you try real hard. See, reality as it actually is, not as you desperately wish it was. Try. This is why Aquinas, and indeed most theists, they're such a ludicrous joke, because they lack comprehension of their actual place in the real world. And that's kind of a problem, isn't it? The last one that we're going to cover today is the last of the 5 ways. The 5th way is the teleological proof. Inanimate things in nature follow patterns of behavior. Except they don't. Behavior, by definition, is the way in which an animal or person acts in response to a particular situation or stimulus. Inanimate objects aren't responding, they're only being acted upon. There is a tendency among humans, not just the religious, to anthropomorphize nature. This is how things are supposed to be. This is how things are supposed to act. This is how it's supposed to go. No, there is no supposed to. This is just how things are. Rocks fall down, relatively speaking, because that's how the particular laws of physics in our universe dictate that they operate. There is no supposed to. There is only what is. If the physical laws were different, then things could go a different way. How you feel about that is completely irrelevant. You just have to deal with what actually is. Nature is full of natural laws that have consistency. Yep, and if it wasn't so, you wouldn't be here. Your very existence depends on that consistency. Yet they can't understand that reality isn't a choice. The things that obey these laws don't have minds. They're not capable of knowing what they're supposed to do. A rock doesn't know it's supposed to go down when they let go instead of going up. Yeah, so what? If you're thrown one direction by an external force, does knowing what you're supposed to do mean anything? No, of course not. You're going that way because that's what physics dictates. Like I said, a lot of anthropomorphizing is going on here. So let's continue. The fact that inanimate things don't know what to do, but do it anyway, implies that there is a mind guiding things. This is kind of an intelligent design argument that nature shows this elegant example of design of purpose. These people have no clue about physics at all because, again, they're relying on thinkers that lived before modern physics existed. This is what happens when your theology never evolves. You end up looking like complete idiots living in the distant past because that's exactly what they're doing, isn't it? So anyway, that's the end of this part of the video, and we have actually gone over all of Aquinas' 5 ways. And they are not at all impressive, are they? They all rely on therefore God thinking, which is absolutely idiotic. And this is why they don't get anywhere outside of their own little religious bubble. They expect everybody to react just like they do and call things God just because they do. And when we come back to the last half of this list, you're going to see exactly that. Yes, I've already looked ahead a little bit. Sue me. The religious are convinced for entirely emotional reasons, but not for any rational ones. Maybe once upon a time, Aquinas might have thought these things because it was the only idea he had, but this is not that time and this is not that place, and people today really shouldn't be that ignorant. That they are, often intentionally, is just sad. But we'll come back next time and wrap up the last 5 reasons, and who knows, they might have something more impressive. I wouldn't bet on it, but I guess we'll see.
Bum